Hey everyone, welcome to HR Tech Talks. I am so glad to have you here with us today. My name is Ben Eubanks, and I'll be joined today by an awesome guest shortly. But first, just want to welcome you here. If you're watching the live session, chime in. Let us know where you're connecting in from, where you're listening in from. I love learning where all of you are and seeing where you're coming in from, because it's so much fun to see. In addition, if you're watching this on the replay later on, guess what? If you're watching on LinkedIn on the replay, you can actually chat and people can still see that after the fact, just like it was coming in live. So feel free to participate in the conversation, whether you're watching this in the moment or after the fact. Does not matter, because you're going to get benefit from the discussion, from the insights from Maria and the conversation and everything else. So I'm really excited today. If you saw the kind of the intro, the teaser for the episode, so what gets measured gets done. We all know that because it's kind of this thing that just floats around. We all have kind of agreed with that statement. But I want to apply that to the conversation today around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, the DEI kind of conversation, because as Maria and I are going to talk about today, this feels like this really big thing that's hard to put your arms around. And companies aren't sure how to tackle that. And so we're going to talk about putting data in front of leaders in order to make it visible, make the problem, make the opportunity visible for them, so they know what to do, how to act on it. And that's what ChartHop does. So they actually, really quick kudos before I bring Maria on, ChartHop is one of the companies that won an HR Tech Award this year for their platform, for their product. They're doing great things to serve the HR audience. So hrtechawards.org, if you want to learn more about that program and who won those things, if you're looking for tools, they're doing great things over there. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and bring Maria Barrera on from ChartHop. Hey, Maria, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
I am so glad to have you here. So before we get to some of the fun things I was teasing a little bit ago, would you take a minute and give the audience a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, definitely. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Super excited to have this conversation, especially during Pride Month, right after Juneteenth. This is the most topical conversation we could have come up with. I'm Maria. I am the head of partnerships and growth at ChartHop, and I spent my career both on the operational side, where I have struggled with a lot of the same challenges that we're trying to solve for. So it is really, really exciting to be able to have this conversation with you today, to tell you what we've learned, how we're tackling it, and hopefully help us all sort of get a little closer to solving a lot of the big issues that we see in the industry.
Goodness, well, you can't set it up much bigger than that, right? Now, like, tell me more, tell me how. So I kind of teased this at the beginning, right? DEI is a conversation we're going to focus on primarily today, but there's lots of different applications for visualizing data. And I know for the HR audience, sometimes that's like, data is not our comfort zone for a lot of us. And I'll admit that, right? When I started out, that was not the area I spent a lot of time. Now I'm a researcher, go figure, right? That's where I spend all of my time. But I think there's an opportunity there to step up, to really enable better conversations with leadership, to elevate the right data, to take a more evidence-based approach, like all those kinds of things weave into this discussion. So I'd love to hear from you. Just kind of kick us off a little bit. Talk about how you're partnering with companies, what sort of conversations you're having. You can start however you wish, because you're the expert here, but I'd love to hear like some of those things. What are they coming to you saying? Then how are you addressing that with them?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest insight behind ChartHop was realizing that every functional area, sales, marketing, engineering, has these hyper robust platforms where they can understand every aspect of how their operations work, right? Whether it's your CRM, where you understand every touch point that a client has had from your companies, whether it's engineering, where you can literally visualize the health of your servers at any given point. Yet when you think about your people, who are the biggest expense and the biggest investment that a company has, HR has been given spreadsheets and some not super user-friendly tools to be able to manage a lot of that. And the sad reality is that a lot of incredible HR leaders have to spend a lot of time doing what I call spreadsheet gymnastics to get any great insights out of their data. And that's really where the insight came from. Our founder, CEO, had dealt with a lot of these questions himself as he was trying to scale his last company. He was looking to, he's from an engineering background. He's excited about taking all this data, really creating a data-informed plan for how he's going to scale his organization, and realized that month after month, he was downloading data into a spreadsheet, and doing pivot tables, and someone's email had changed. So now there was no longer a unique identifier to be able to consolidate data from different systems. And it was a nightmare. And he spent so much time trying to do that. And as an engineer, he's like, you know what, like, I'm just going to build this because it's so needed. And as he started consulting with different companies, both large and small, both private and public, and realized that everyone had that same need, that HR leaders have, when they see ChartHop, they always say, like, I've been thinking about this for so long. Like, wow, why didn't I build this? Because it's something that they've noticed is needed for such a long time. And our point of view here is that we can, one, centralize all your people data, right? So you have all these systems that are really great at what they do, but you never really get a holistic view of all your people data, right? So we've built ChartHop to be API first, integration first, so that you can finally centralize it in one place and then make that data accessible. And when I say accessible, I mean, one, give the company access to it, right? You should not be hiding an org chart. It should not just be in one platform where nobody has access to it, but there should be an ongoing place where everyone, especially as your organization grows and changes, that everyone can access. And the biggest secret sauce here is making it visual and realizing that a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And if we can take that data that's often lives in these highly complex systems and in spreadsheets and visualize it, then you can get people to get that insight much faster and actually act on it. And we then decrease the time because you're not spending all this time analyzing and sort of consolidating data, but you can actually spend time on the place where it matters, which is strategizing and acting on it and making initiatives actually come to life. So super excited to share what that looks like, and especially as it applies to diversity.
Yeah, one of the things, goodness, I have 2 or 3 ideas that popped out from that. One of them, you talked about the spreadsheet gymnastics. I didn't call it something that nice, like spreadsheet torture usually, but I thought about all those times where, and the people listening probably can completely, have lived this, taking something, working it through Excel, trying to get the spreadsheet to work just right, get it pretty, then make a chart, then put it over into PowerPoint. That's where we're going to actually be sharing it out of. We never just send that Excel file anywhere. And so it's trying to get all these things together and hooked together. And you said a minute ago, this is how HR leaders have told you, like, oh, I would have made this. Like, this is what I thought of. And that's the first thought that I had when I saw the system was, this isn't just something I thought of, like, this is how we think as HR leaders. We are trained. We are trained literally to see people so we can understand them, so we can support them, so we can help them and understand how they relate to each other hierarchically, how they relate to each other in a diversity sense, and all these sorts of lenses that we put on the world. As an HR leader, that is something that we do naturally because we've been trained to do that. But the rest of the organization doesn't see things that way. And so our mind's thinking like this, but it's about getting that out of your head and into something where you can share it with someone else. And that's what kind of the first thought that I had. I'm glad you mentioned that a minute ago, because I thought that might have been kind of weird to think about it that way. But apparently I'm not the only one that has had that thought, that this is how we're already trying to see the world and trying to share that vision. It just now gives us the ability, the tool set to share that vision in a real way.
Exactly. And when you think about the org chart as an example, that's really one way to visualize your company and the structure, right? And you talk about how HR really thinks about things hierarchically. But there's also, now, especially in the age of remote work, you can visualize your team on a map. Actually, why don't let's bring up the platform and show people what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So here we have the org chart. And again, when we think about ChartHop, it's people analytics visualized, right? So this is one visualization of your company, but I can then look at different dimensions of this data. So now I'm looking at gender across my team. I can look at ethnicity across the team. And that brings the data to life in a way that it's never done before. But I know now I don't necessarily only want to see the org chart. Yes. I want to see how this looks in a map, right? So now I have my team all over the world, and I can see where everybody's at. If I have specific offices, what is the breakdown in that particular place? And this allows us as HR leaders to have a conversation that's much more robust because you can see right away, like, hey, this is what our team looks like. This is where we need to invest, and these are the types of changes we need to make. This picture is so much more powerful than that spreadsheet, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Goodness, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because again, we can look at this through all these different lenses. You're right. You use gender, you use ethnicity to really make it clear for people there what's happening. But I love the map too. Again, especially today, if we are going to get together, I'll tell you something just funny, kind of seems kind of a tangent a little bit, but years ago when I worked for a company, we had offices spread out across the US. And whenever I was on a drive somewhere, I was always like, who's along the way? I'd love to find out, who I could say hello to, because they got emails from me all this time as the HR guy, as the comms guy, but I haven't met many of them. And so I was always curious, and we didn't have I would have to do like a zip code search and all this other kind of filtering. It was terrible. And I often just kind of skipped it because it was a pain. But like something like that, even I'm thinking like, going for the road trip, and we're going to go by and say hello to, Jerome and Felipe and all these other people on the way. That's just, I don't know, that was kind of fun for me. So anyway, not what you built it for, not what it's meant for, but I'm thinking like all the different fun things that I would have used it for. So,
but that's exactly the reason, right? Like there's so many micro interactions that now you as an HR leader can create. When COVID was at its peak, we had companies sending care packages to locations that were in hotspots and being really intentional about that, or using it to track how school closures were affecting coworkers. Then as people started sort of nomading, and people then would use it as an opportunity to meet each other face to face safely and outdoors with masks on. But they would do that, and it's such a unique way, because because everyone has access and everyone can see, like, oh, I'm traveling to Idaho and I know this person's there. Like, that's great. So there's a lot of layers to HR, right? And the strategy and the way that you use this data to plan for the future and empower your managers, empower your executives is super, super important. But so is the way that you foster community and the way that you build that culture internally. And we have profiles, we have all these like micro pieces that you can add to your employee life cycle, where I think it really sort of fosters a connection in a way that a lot of us have been missing during COVID, right? So it's definitely another layer of it, but it has come up quite a bit.
When you talk about layers, I had a question for you, because I'm curious. It seems like if I had nothing at all, right, except my spreadsheet, always got the spreadsheet, I had nothing but the spreadsheet, and you were able to move to, okay, suddenly I can see the kind of things you were just showing. Is there a next step? Do companies get more mature? Like, okay, now we can see where everybody is. Okay, but that doesn't actually solve the problem. It's okay, now let's figure out what we can do next, maybe like on pay or something else. Like, what other kinds of things can you visualize to take those next steps towards action?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about this one, because when the conversation around DEI really picked up about a year ago, there was a lot of conversation around representation, right? And how representation is not enough. And we actually had a guest speaker come last week, ChartHop. He's a CNN political commentator, New York best-selling author, Keith Boykin, and he was telling us, his own perspective as a gay Black man, and how this conversation and how all of it has evolved over the past year. And one thing he said that really sort of stuck with me is that diversity without inclusion is just tokenism. And that really stuck with me, because we're looking at, a lot of companies are looking at representation, which is super, super important. But then how do we go beyond that to really making sure that inclusion is being thought as forefront, right? And that's compensation, that's looking at engagement data, looking at performance data, and are people being assessed fairly? And compensation plans, are those being assessed fairly? So if you want, I can show you just really quickly another piece of the platform, one that I love, because it's so emblematic of how quickly we can help leaders sort of jump from from data to action.
Okay.
So
you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here you go.
So this is our reporting tool. Right now I'm visualizing headcount by location, but I can really easily do an average analysis of average comp by gender over the past 36 months in I think that was what, like 3 seconds. And I mean, you've done this before. You know how long it takes for companies to do this. And the challenge I had when I was in this role, it would take weeks for me to pull this data and make sure that everything was accurate. And now I have it, and I can now act on it, right? I now understand, okay, this is where we're at. I can dig deeper, right? So I can click on any one of these data points and see the data at that's making that up, and then understand, are there outliers, like why is this working the way it is, and then act on it, right? Like, this is what, just having this data at your fingertips reduces the friction for you to actually start thinking about, okay, now what's the action plan we take from here, given that, hey, I can take that screenshot, I can talk to my management team, and we can actually come up with a plan. So that is one of my favorite features, because the time it takes to build out this data is honestly, I think, one of the biggest things that's holding us back in making changes. And it can go such a long way.
I'm thinking back, and for those in the audience that had to do this in the past, go ahead and chime in. I'm thinking back to the times where every November the 7th or so, that first Monday after November the 7th, it sticks on my head, we would schedule our competition review board meeting to think about, okay, we're about to have reviews, we're about to have pay adjustments. Then we set our follow-up meeting for after the reviews came in to look at all of the adjustments that were suggested by managers, filtering by gender, filtering by ethnicity, filtering by age, like trying to look at all these kinds of things to make sure, is one group getting all of this, or is it evenly spread across the organization? And there were times where we had to step in as a leadership team and say, adjusting here, adjusting there, trying to make sure that it was equitable across the board. And that took 2 weeks, 3 weeks for me to prepare for that meeting every year.
Yeah.
And I'm a little angry at you right now, because I could have done it in like 3 seconds. It didn't exist back then. But I'm thinking, again, anyone listening to this that has any responsibility for comp, though, you're thinking, okay, right. It's just accepted that it takes that long. It's that hard. It's that onerous and difficult to do those kinds of things. And it doesn't have to be, right? Thank goodness the tools are able to do it more quickly. And I just love the tools and the tech and stuff. And it was fun to see it like moving in real time as you're adjusting it. You could see where it was down to where it is now. And all those little things make it easier to see what the true picture is, what's happening. And as you said, like, this is all leading to us to actually do something, to actually take action. And if the data's fuzzy, if the data are unclear, if you're not quite sure, you can't get enough insight, you're making a decision based on a guess. At least having the information there at your fingertips, having a clear picture like you just showed, you can say, hey, we can see what the issue is. We can pick out the 2 or 3 things that are tied into that. We're going to take action on those, because the data are showing that those are the most predictive of what this, they're the biggest factors in this and where the situation is today. So it just excites me to think about all the kinds of things you can do. And again, pay is an example of that. We talked about other things in this conversation, your performance, anything. We create so much data in HR, but we are often at the same time data starved. It's this weird paradox. I'll say one last thing. I'll keep talking, but it's exciting me. Years ago, everybody's going to get tired of hearing my, I walked uphill both ways kind of stories in HR. But years ago, I remember we had a vendor come in. They said, hey, we've got this ERP system. It's finance, accounting, all that stuff. And we've got an HR module we'll throw in for free. It's going to be good, right? It's going to be good. And so I'm actually excited, because we've never had a thing across all of our systems. All of our employee data is literally in a spreadsheet. The entire employee database is right there. It's password protected on my desktop, which is crazy. And so I'm like, okay, great. Tell me about it. Well, you can upload information here. You can put in information there. Okay, awesome, wonderful. What can I do with it? What do you mean? Like, can I report on it? No. Can I get it back out? No, but you can go and look at it. I can look at it now. I don't need it to be put in this other system, so I can have another place to keep up with it. And when you were talking a minute ago about API first, about connecting in with the systems you already have, this isn't about, okay, this creates yet another place for you to go and have to manage things and track things and keep up with. No, this pulls all that stuff into one place so you can see the one source of truth. That first thing that flashed to my head was me, kind of my face falling as they're telling me these things, like my heart just sinking. I'm not even worth it. Free is still too expensive for me when it's this bad of a system. And so anyway, I'll stop with the reminiscing now. But there are so many things that appeal to me in this because I've had to do these things. I've been in that audience you're talking to, right? Those leaders you're chatting with, and had to kind of face that. So anyway, all right.
No, what you just said resonates so much because there's a saying in Spanish, "Lo barato sale caro." I guess it's like cheap things are ultimately more expensive because of that manual time that you're putting in, and that's something that doesn't, when you're thinking about ROI and you're thinking about talking to finance about like why you need to spend on this tool, they're always thinking, okay, what's the alternative? Spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are free. Yes, but your time is worth so much, right? And how much time are you spending creating those org charts in PowerPoint and making sure that the lines were really aligned with the boxes? And I know it happens all the time, and your time is worth so much more because there's so much more impact you can have if you have the right tools. And oftentimes you don't. The people with the purse strings may not always understand the value of that manual time and how stitching all that data together and making that seamless can add so much to the business. So that's something that we work on with our leaders too, to really think about like how much time are you saving by consolidating all this data. Like we one of the customers we work with, they're a fully remote organization, a little bit less than 1,000 employees. And because they've given everyone access to ChartHop, everyone has the data they need to have their own compensation data, their own sort of employee data, and like managers have access to their directs data. And, everything is access controlled. So you can make sure that everyone has access to the data they need to have access to and don't have access to the data they don't. Meaning that no rogue spreadsheet sharing happens, but that amounted for them over a year to like honestly millions of dollars in lost productivity time that they saved, because they were asking for they were asking questions from them, and then HR just couldn't focus on the big things because they spent 60% of their week answering little questions
just
for the team.
Churning all the time, and that treadmill never stops. It never stops.
I know.
Your Spanish is beautiful, by the way. You probably take it for granted, but I have a fondness for Spanish. So I took many years in high school. I spent some time in Guatemala and just love the language. So
nice. All right. Yeah.
If someone wants to learn more about ChartHop, wants to connect with you, or wants to just know more, obviously, number one, anyone listening to this, ChartHop and Maria, their LinkedIn profiles are linked in the description of this episode here on LinkedIn. So just click the details and you'll be able to see and connect right over to her. Tell her you heard about her on HR Tech Talks, or follow ChartHop on LinkedIn. But there's another way for them to connect and learn more about what you and your team are doing to support employers out there right now.
Yeah, so go to charthop.com. Right there, we have a little form. You can input your email and we'll reach out right away. We'd love to learn what you're doing to collect this data and how we can help. I mean, I know that especially a lot of companies are doing self-ID surveys, analyzing pay gaps, all of that you can centralize and do it in ChartHop, so you don't have to do the spreadsheet gymnastics, or as Ben calls it, the spreadsheet torture. Yes. We can save you. Will help. We really want to make sure that you have the time to do where the most impactful pieces, right? So would love to chat with you. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, and always happy to chat more about how we can get make some real changes in the industry. So share ideas, share concerns, always happy to chat more.
Awesome. Wonderful. Maria, I appreciate you for hanging out with us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Ben. This was great.
All right. To everybody else, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Maria today. I hope that you maybe got your toes stepped on a little bit, because again, we put up with so many things in HR, and at the same time, there's very rarely an HR leader that I meet that doesn't say, I want to have a bigger impact on the organization. I want to reach more people. I want to support more initiatives. And yet we're always kind of capped out. We're hitting the ceiling. We can't do more things. And so getting smarter, working smarter, having better tools at our disposal can allow us to do that. And the way that Maria started this whole thing off, right? Marketing has it, finance has it, Sales has it. All these other IT has it. Everyone else has these tools at their fingertips to be able to see what's happening and respond. And if the last year hasn't shown you anything other than the fact that we need to be able to see what's going on so we can respond, hopefully that's kind of the clearing call. It's going to pull you in, remind you of that. So enough beating on that one. I appreciate all of you for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed learning from Maria. I know I did. I will see you next week on another episode of HR Tech Talks, where we talk to another company that's doing innovative work in the HR talent learning space, serving companies, doing just innovative things. This is so much fun for me to be able to bring this to you. I appreciate all of you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.